Welcome back to the Tracy Take. I am Tyler here with my brother Ryan, and today we are breaking down the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2024 offseason recap. We're going to go over all their free agents that have moved on and also new acquisitions, review their draft picks. And at the end of the video, we will go over the 2024 schedule and provide our record prediction. So be sure to stay tuned for the entire video to see how we think the Buccaneers are going to do in the 2024 season. Before we get into the offseason, be sure to like this video and also subscribe to the channel to get notified whenever we create new content. We're doing a full offseason recap for all 32 teams. So if you want to see how the other teams in the NFC South did or just all the other teams in general, we have videos coming out Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So be sure to ring that bell to get notified when new videos come out. Ryan, let's pull this up here. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers once again won the NFC South. Congratulations to them. They went 9-8 on the season with a second half surge. I would say the second half of the season was phenomenal for them. They only lost one game in their last 6 games, so to say. So they went 5-1 down the stretch to get to that point. Falcons also collapsed as well, so you're welcome. I will throw that in there at the beginning of this video. I understand why if you're wanting to leave the video now. Totally get it. But as a whole, though, I think when I look at these numbers, I think I'll get to the rushing stat here in a second because that one makes sense. But I think the total yards, like the passing yards specifically, they started off so slow at the early part of the season. If I look at their numbers here, week 1, 169 passing yards. Week 2, they had 317 against the Bears, but who didn't? 133 against the Philadelphia Eagles, and week 3. Week 4, only 239. Week 5, week 5 they had a bye. Week 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Didn't have anything more than 260 yards as right there. And so just really slow numbers. And actually, even too, I could have kept going as well. So I feel like the performance, though, and the overall efficiency really improved kind of in that 6-game stretch, which helped propel them overall.
Yeah.
We still had a couple of duds in there, especially like week 18 when they beat the Panthers, only 228 total yards. But I think part of that also might have been, too, on why the rushing stat was so awful, is teams knew that this offensive line, outside of Tristan Wirfs, really couldn't block for too much. And so I think maybe they had some extra guys go up against Mike Evans, against Chris Godwin as well. And all that being said, though, Baker Mayfield was still threw for over 4,000 yards on the season. So 4,044 with 28 touchdowns and 10 picks. Great season overall. Then when it comes to
I have a question.
Hold on.
How does Baker have 4,000 yards, but their passing is 3,812?
So I use Pro Football Reference, and what factors that into the passing number as well is they also include sacks as well. I don't really like it either, but it's more. I think it's more general representation on the overall offensive performance as well. I wish it was more just team passing offense.
Okay,
but to be fair, though, to that as well, then for a team like the Saints, for example, their passing numbers would be all skewed if you just went off Derek Carr's number, because then you still have Taysom Hill as well, who's throwing the ball. So I think just kind of it gives a good overarching.
I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you bringing that up, because then too as well. So they bring up the sacks allowed as well, and so they were average on the offensive line, which I think kind of goes to me saying like that. To my point of the offensive line just being okay and not that great, they really could have run block for anything. And defensively, though, they one of the top rushing defense in the league. They got after the passers as well with 48 sacks, 9th overall in the league. Secondary, though, is going to be the issue. And what's curious about that is they did move on from a couple of guys such as Carlton Davis, which we'll get here into a second. I've been talking a lot, though. Want to throw it to you. Yeah. What do you think of kind of Tampa Bay Buccaneers team as a whole and kind of what they've done so far going into the offseason when you look at these numbers?
Yeah. So to me, I remember watching them, and this team, they were very streaky, and they also, I think, relied a lot on big plays on offense to really spark things, especially early on in the season. Like, for example, the game in Buffalo was very low scoring. I think that they had a late fourth quarter big play that allowed them to go and win that low scoring game. And so I think that was kind of how they were able to stay close to average. Also, I think Minnesota was another example of that, where it was pretty dull game, and then at the very end they had a couple big plays that ended up scoring them a touchdown to win. And then this defense kept them in a lot of those games despite a really bad passing defense. And so I like what they have going forward. You definitely saw at the end of the year that this team made strides to on the offensive side of the ball. They even beat Philadelphia, who was struggling at the time, but still going and winning a road playoff game in all places of Philadelphia is not
No,
easy.
they hosted it, and so
Oh, that's right, they won.
yeah,
Sorry. Even
yeah.
well,
But
okay,
still
so
though, the reigning NFC champs and just go in there
yeah,
and have them come into your house and still just dominate them.
yeah,
And so
that which I don't remember the specifics of that game. I do remember not ever feeling like Philadelphia had a chance.
yeah,
So, all in all, I just think it was a good performance. They improved throughout the year. They won a playoff game. I think that is for a team that I thought would be picking in the top 10. That is a really good performance.
yeah,
So, let's move on now to some of their departures. So, not a whole lot of big departures. The one that sticks out to me is Carlton Davis, as you said. They were already thin in that cornerback room. They move him for, I believe, a third round pick to Detroit.
hmm
And then other than that, some depth pieces, and then some older guys. Devin White, Shaq Barrett moved on from them. Ryan Jansen, older, torn ACL, tried to do a certain type of therapy to heal it, and it didn't work. So he missed 2 straight seasons. Um, and then David Moore, Aaron Stiney, Nick Leverett, and then Cam Gill. I mean, all those guys are uh, backup level rotational
yeah.
guys. Is that I don't really think are going to be missed that much. I think they did a good job of replacing some of them.
Yeah, I think in general, it's these were good pieces to move on from. Like Jack Barrett, for example, he did have 4.5 sacks, and he did start in 16 games. But I still
Yeah,
go look at. I mean, that's why you got Yaya Diaby, you got Vita Vey, you got Joe Tryon as well, Levante David. You
yeah,
still have a bunch of guys though that they all got more sacks than him. I think you still have a lot of good young guys. Uh, Kalijah Cansey as well. He's going to be more of a defensive on the interior defensive side.
yeah,
But still, I think he can improve his numbers as well. He had just a half a sack less than Shaq Barrett. So I think that his numbers
yeah,
are replaceable. And so, in general, yeah, not really too many guys. I think that are maybe you don't want to say good riddance to them, but I understand why you'd want to say good riddance to them,
yeah.
especially too if it's an age thing.
It's not good riddance. It's
It's a see you later.
see you later.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so, uh, and I do think that they added on some good guys as well in the secondary to kind of help out. Jordan Whitehead, for example, Bryce Hall, a couple guys from New York Jets. If you're trying to improve your secondary, getting guys from the New York Jets secondary, I think is a pretty solid one to go with, as
yeah,
well to Very Thomas as well. And so there's a couple other guys as well that I really like. Ben Bredesen and then Sua Opetita. Opeta,
Opeta,
sorry,
Opeta.
I got it the second time. Perfect. And so more of the backup role, I would say, up in Philly,
Mhm.
but him coming in providing some good depth. I think for the little bit that they did on adding guys, because they spent a lot of money getting Baker Mayfield re-signed,
Yeah,
getting Mike Evans re-signed, which absolutely makes sense. You have to get both those guys. I think in general, I think they did a decent job bringing in good talent, and I think improved, especially due with this secondary as a focus. When I look at the draft picks, really love Graham Barton
mhm.
replaces your Ryan Jensen pick already. Chris Braswell, Tyke Smith, and then Jalen McMillan. I think that was a good way to round out the top 100.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Bucky Irving, a good change of pace back, especially we saw they struggled to run the ball with Rashad White last year in a more of a traditional sense. So going and getting a third down guy that can come in and be more of an outlet for Baker Mayfield. Not that Rashad White can't do that, just getting a guy that's going to be a little bit more elusive and harder to bring down. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then Elijah Klein and then Devin Culp tested really well as a tight end at the combine. So go and take a bet on some athletic traits there. I think that's those some really good picks.
Yeah,
Exactly 7 guys, 7 picks. And I like what they did. Got I think good value in this draft.
yeah, and I would say decent variety as well. They did double up a little
Yeah.
bit on the interior offensive line, which I totally get too. Because if we want to
They
go
need
on to
it.
they want to go on to the depth chart here. So this is the current depth chart from our land as well. So as you see, Graham Barton, he's slotted in there at center. Cody Mock is who they got last year, who had a good rookie season, improved a lot.
Mhm.
Ben Bredesen right now is kicking in at left guard. And so, but you have a couple other good rookies as well, right behind him that they drafted later on in the draft, also picked up as undrafted rookies. And so I think then too as well, but the Sua Opeta as well is going to provide some good opportunity as well. So that to me, I think it's going to be the storyline because we know who their top receivers are. We know their starting quarterback is going to be Baker Mayfield. I think it'll be interesting to see how Bucky Irving potentially does against Rashad White and kind of see how they utilize both of them. But in general, though, it's still going to be Rashad White's backfield. It's going to be, I think, if Graham Barton can come in and instantly improve that offensive line and be the offensive line center that we all know it could be. Just a great offensive lineman that we saw him at Duke and how versatile he was.
Mm-hmm.
Cody Mock can take that next step. Tristan Wirfs is obviously, I mean, he's Pro Bowl left tackle. You can make an argument he's the best left tackle in the league behind Trent Williams. And so I think just seeing kind of how this offensive line rounds out, how does Luke Gedeke do coming into his third season? If they can all keep making those improvements, because in general now, looking at it, Tristan Wirfs was drafted in 2020. Now you got Graham Barton in 24, Cody Mock 23, Luke Gedeke in 2022. These guys can keep making those strides. They could have a very young and talented offensive lineman this year and only keep gaining veteran experience. And they're going to re-sign Tristan Wirfs if they haven't already. I'm blanking on it.
I'm not sure of that either.
They've definitely accepted his 5th-year option.
They're
going to re-sign him. I mean, there's no way they're not going to re-sign Tristan Wirfs.
If they don't re-sign him, they'll franchise tag him and then negotiate. There's no way Tristan Wirfs hits free agency in.
I will gladly give you guys Jake Matthews, who's been a long-time Falcon, who's been a great left tackle for us, for Tristan Wirfs. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, we'll do
it. But let's move on to the defensive depth chart here. A lot of good pieces here. I think on the front 7 specifically, Logan Hall, Vita Vea, Kalijah Cansey, Dro Tryon, Shoyinka. All 4 of those guys are first or second round picks within the last 6 years. Vita Vea being the oldest. And then you also are going to have Levante David and Yaya Diaby, 2 of the top edge rushers from last year. And then you add Chris Braswell and Randy Gregory into that mix as well. And this is kind of something I think we're seeing a little bit more around the league is a lot of teams are going with edge rushers with slightly different skill sets for different scenarios. And they're kind of doing the running back thing where they have edge rusher by committee. I think the Falcons are another team. They now have, they drafted 3 defensive linemen. They now have 2 or 3 other outside linebacker edge rusher types that they're going to rotate in on any given down. And I think the Buccaneers are kind of doing a similar thing here, definitely getting younger. And then I'm really interested to see how this secondary comes together. They have a really good group of safeties right now. One of the guys that you forgot to mention that they re-signed was Antoine Winfield. That he got a really big extension as well. And then, so I'm really curious to see what this secondary looks like because kind of can't get worse. I think that was part of the reason why they got rid of Carlton Davis was like, well, our secondary already sucks with you. So let's just trade him for an asset and then rebuild this thing through free agency with some new players. So I like that move. And I think they did a pretty good job of finding some pieces here that can come in and contribute. They don't have a lot of good depth at this position, though. I think you look, their backup safeties are 2 undrafted free agents from last year's class, and a bunch of the guys are undrafted free agents from this year's class that are making up that 3rd row as well. So it'll be interesting to see if the secondary starts to get nicked up, who ends up playing for them, and do they end up back in a similar boat.
Yeah, I will say too, and we've been saying this with other channels, I think they're in a good problem if your secondary is a little bit weaker when you have a good front 7. I mean, when you're top 10 in overall sacks, and I look at this team right here, they brought a lot of the guys back as well. And so I'm not too concerned on their front 7. And so if you're still trying to put the right pieces together with the secondary, I would rather have it that way than reverse, where you don't have an offensive line, you don't have a pass rusher. You can have the best corners in the league, but even those guys can't guard these receivers for 5, 6, 7 seconds. If your defensive linemen are not getting pass pressure. And so, but to your point, I think getting Jordan Whitehead back, getting Bryce Hallswell, bringing some more competition. So just have to see how that secondary develops. And that's the thing to me, then kind of my last statement, kind of segueing then into the 2024 preview schedule, is I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just have a lot of really good players. We said something similar about the Saints, but more like they're just average. Like I think the team is just
Yeah.
average, so to say. But at minimum, I think the Buccaneers have a lot of really really good players. Just on paper, I think you can match them up against a lot of good teams. But
Mhm.
I think then too, as we kind of move on to the schedule here now, and they won the division, they have the toughest schedule in the NFC South because they're going to face all the toughest teams, and they're going to hit a stretch here where it is going to be pretty tough for that. I think it's going to start off well. I think home at Washington, going up against rookie quarterback, I think that's a good setup. Going on the road to Detroit, I think that's going to be a tough game. And it might be Detroit's home opener. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that's going to be tough where they just lost. Then Denver and Philly. So I think they can come away there winning those first couple of games. It's going to be tough, I think, with Atlanta, New Orleans. You never know those division games. So I think 3-3 to potentially 5-1. I think 5-1's best case scenario.
Yeah.
But 3-3, maybe throw in a 2-4 in there. But I'm going to say 3-3 during that stretch. But what's going to concern me though is going to be then these next four games:
Yeah.
Baltimore, Atlanta, KC, and then San Francisco. I think Atlanta at home, I think they have an opportunity. But Atlanta, I think on paper though, has made those strides they have those superstars and they have a much better quarterback. There was a big issue last year. Defense, I think, is going to be about the same, if not maybe slightly improved, if they can just stay healthy. And so that's just what I'm talking about. But Baltimore, KC, San Francisco, I mean, these were all semifinalists in last year's playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't see them winning that stretch. Then they do come off the bye going up against the Giants, then Carolina. They're going up against Las Vegas. I think Las Vegas is actually honestly just a tough matchup for them. So that's where I think, but it will be at home. I think that'll be a really good game. Then they just have an interesting final 4 weeks because we don't really know how the Chargers are going to do. Don't really know how Dallas is going to be, but both those games are
Yeah.
on the road. I think Carolina, New Orleans wrapping up with 2 divisional games. I think they're going to be good. I think they're going to be in the playoff hunt, but I just wonder if they're just going to be able to be a dominant team throughout the entire year, potentially even vie for home field advantage if they do go for the division.
Yeah, my big thing looking at the schedule. So first 6 games, I think 3-3, 4-2 is what they'll come out at. They have that 4-game stretch is really tough. The only really winnable game that I see for them is the Atlanta at home, and that
Yeah,
is also because it's a division game, and you just kind of never know how
yeah,
those are going to go. But then coming out, I like their next 4 games for them. Dallas is tough, but then I like their last 2 games, especially getting to stay at home for the last 2 weeks. I think will be a big deal.
yeah,
But I mean, all in all, I don't see a lot of games where I'm like, okay, that is a loss. On the flip side of that, I don't really see a lot of games where like, okay, that's like mark that one in the win column for them.
yeah,
And so it's kind of that same thing. I think they're a better version of what the Saints are trying to do. They just have better players all around, kind of what you mentioned when we were on the depth chart slides.
yeah,
I think they're going to be a very competitive team this year again because those guys they've had another year in offseason to play with each other. They've grown as a team. I think the secondary will be better. I think this offensive line should be better. Um, it's just with a tougher schedule, we'll have to see how much it really translates onto the field. So let's get into our records here. I'll start it off. I had the higher record here with 10-7. I like this Bucks team. I think they have the veteran experience on the offensive side of the ball to be able to overcome some of their shortcomings. And I think this running game, while I don't think it's going to be a top 10, I think it should be closer to average than what was it, 29?
yeah. No, I think the running game offensively was last.
Oh yeah, it was 32nd. So
Yeah,
like it should be maybe in the low 20s to high teens in that range, I think. And so if they can do that, I think that'll unlock a lot for this passing game as well, just as offense in general. And I think that they'll be able to eke out some of those closer games that we're worried about. Maybe like they'll probably split with Atlanta. Maybe they'll beat Philly uh, and Dallas and then get a couple wins there. But
yeah,
all in all, I just think this is a really solid team. They're not going to be an easy out any week.
yeah. They're not going to be an easy out at all. I'd be curious to kind of see with Dave Canales moving on, kind of how the new offensive system, like if there is a lag there, if there's a change, just as new offensive coordinators come into new systems that typically kind of takes offenses to get into the rhythm there. So I went with 9-8, but kind of as I was talking throughout the video, I was even thinking like I feel like 10-7, or maybe being on the other side of you 11-6. I feel like that's their range. I think they're going to be above 500. The Saints, I had the low 500 just because that's how I look at their roster. That's just how I kind of feel like I think they're not a 500 team. Look at this Bucs team, and they're at least above 500. And so I kind of talked myself into going 10-7, maybe 11-6 as well.
Yeah.
They're just going to have a lot of close games. And we'll have to see if they can be. They need to be more balanced on the offensive side of the ball. If they can develop a running game and they can be 20th in rushing, I think that's going to open things up more in the passing game to where they can maybe be top 10 in passing as well. And then that's when I could see them going 11-6, 12-5, and win this division. And so, no surprise to you Bucs fans who are probably still in this video. I had the Falcons winning this division. So it means we're going to go 6-11 this year. But
pick 8th overall again.
And pick 8th overall. Yeah, you can pencil us in as picking 8th overall after we did it 3 years in a row. But I think for the Buccaneers, I think 9-8 is your floor. I think I was being pessimistic. I think you guys could go 12-5 also.
Yeah, and that's I will say like they do have tougher stretches of this schedule. And so I think maybe like we could see them rattle off a couple losses in a row. But with this depth chart, again, another year playing together, I do like this team. The two areas of concern are kind of the same as last year, that offensive line and that secondary. But they've done more this offseason to address it than I feel like they did last year. Yeah. So I feel like last year they were just kind of like, well, we don't have the money to move on we don't have the money to add or replace any of these guys. This year they were kind of like, all right, well, these are the two spots we really need improvements. They went out and did it, and I think that speaks a lot about this front office and hopefully what this team can do on the field in 2024. So
I agree.
Let's go ahead and wrap this one up here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below on what you thought of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offseason. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently? And on that, we will see you guys